Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford, here, starting exactly 1 minute late. We need extra time to get started out here, and hopefully everyone can actually hear me this time. We had to do the sound check one more time, and hopefully we have audio and all those things that lead to the most, popular live streams. Anyway, hi guys. Let's get going. We've got a lot to cover today, and this basically is going to be our first viewer tips show of the year. And what I would like very much, if you could, is if you have questions about anything comic-based related or comic-y or anything else, please put them in the live stream chat to @ComicBase TV, and we'll hit as many of those as we possibly can. If you put them to @ComicBase TV, then hopefully we can catch as many of those as possible. All right, a quick round the horn here just to say hi to everyone as we're getting started here. Andre, first up here, welcome, and we have some news related to some of the things you've been asking for in ComicBase, so we'll hit that one in just a bit. Oro, great to see you from Minneapolis. Dread ice storm went through Minneapolis last night. Not even 15-ton transit buses. Yeah, Minneapolis winter is brutal. I've done way too many of them. I don't want to do them again. Anyway, good luck surviving those ones. Thomas B, great to see you. Jet City, Robbie Weinberg, Toledo, balmy 45 degrees, as is Nashville out here. Also, surprisingly not January-ish, which is kind of enjoying it. So it feels a little bit like being in California just at the moment. Xandu Comics, welcome to Seattle. It's Tim Kilbreth, and our admin, our mod, Greg Tax, is in the house here as well. Did he say negative 33 degrees? It might be. I don't know. Okay, I think we're good to go here. I haven't heard any screams that no one can hear me. So I think we'll get the show on the road. All right, so guys, by the way, if you like this sort of thing, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps get the word out and everything, and we'll hit that. Let me see if we got anything else in the chat. I think we got it. Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, comic-based news. Then we'll hit some content news and some computer industry stuff, some comic industry stuff, and then we're going to hit as many tech tips as we can. I've got several that people sent me or that have asked me recently. I'll be addressing, but if you have questions for anyone, please go ahead and post them in the chat. First of all, comic-based news to start off with is the comic-based wireless scanners. If you bought them or tried to buy them during the sale, you'll know that we, at the very end of the sale, ran out of them, as we knew we would, but they are back in stock. We just got a shipment in. So if you've been looking for a wireless scanner for your database, you can go ahead and order those now, and we'll be able to get those out to you straight away. Content. My goodness gracious me, the last 2 weeks have been off the freaking charts as far as the content, guys. We have processed 2 weeks in a row over 40,000 new items, over 40,000 updates to existing items, price changes and so forth. 2 weeks, it's psychotic how much data you guys have been sending our way and how much indexing our guys have been doing. We have just, we're going to be blowing past 1.1 million comic books this week. It feels like we crossed the million mark, 18 months ago, and we just added another 100,000 comics, very, very recently. In addition to that, we didn't even get a chance to make news about breaking 900,000 covers when we're right now getting very close to having 925,000. We'll be probably the next braggable amount. Maybe we should just wait another week or two before we hit 950 at this rate. Yes, when we hit the 925,000 level, I'm going to be pressing going to press with new picture discs, as well as updating all the disc images, so as well as the quick start images. So if you want to be able to download the entire thing all at once, if you're an archive user, go ahead, and at that point we'll put an announcement out, but go ahead and just go to your registrations, go to the download links, and you'll be able to download a quick start image file, probably be approximately on the order of 6 gigabytes in size, and it'll contain all 900 gajillion, 1,000 images that we'll have in there in tiny size. And then when you click on them, ComicBase will now automatically supersize those up to the full size just by the act of looking at them. All right, so let's see what else is going on. With the program, we don't have a lot of program news this week right now. We are working on a number of things, including Andre, one of our massive submitters of newspaper information, has pointed out that when you add so much information to the log all at once, it actually overflows the ability of most text editors to even open the darn file. So just in interest of keeping that sensible, we're making efforts to split the log files. We're going to start with making them according to media type, but as we get into the problem a bit more, we're going to probably have to have them automatically segmented so that if for some reason, I don't know, 50,000 or 100,000 new, newspapers hit things in one go, well, we'll probably have to bump even the newspapers into multiple log files just to, make them so they're readable for those of you who enjoy reading log files. But that's coming. It turns out it's a little bit more complicated problem than we thought when we first getting into it. We also have a few other futzy fixes that people have reported, just very random stuff, with the program. But if you have anything that you are ever thinking isn't working quite the way you expect it to with the program or anything else like that, please always send that information to support@comicbase.com. And we try to be very active about, if there's something that actually is legit wrong, even if it's just a redraw bug, we tend to get on that stuff fairly quickly. And for all of us as well, we're getting ready. We're pulling into the next cycle of putting out our next quarterly update. It's going to be for a while because there hasn't been all that much that's changed since our fourth quarter update so far. We just started the quarter, but we do roll this up once a quarter into the right now we're at 23.1, there'll be 23.2, 23.3, etc., as the major version numbers. And those ones go out as forced updates to try to get everyone on the same page as far as where the program is with everything. So we're in the process of kind of assembling the list of things that we want to move into that release. We can address some larger things as we go on these kind of quarterly roll-up things. But if you have anything that you'd like to see, please go ahead and send us comments at support@comicbase.com. And like I said, we tend to be fairly responsive to these sorts of things. But if you do want to see all the little things we're doing in the meantime, just in ComicBase's preferences, go to, there's an option. Let me flip over to that screen so I can show it to you. If you go under Setup, go to Preferences, and bring it onto the screen so you can see it. Right where you say check for updates, make sure you list it check for interim updates as well. And then that way you'll be able to see all the little things that we're doing as we're doing them every time you check the program. All right, so that should do that one right there. All right, let me see here. And Greg also reminds everyone, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. That definitely helps us. All right. Let me flip back here just for a moment. All right, so as far as comic industry stuff or computer industry stuff, there's one big anti-announcement and one big actual announcement. The anti-announcement is the Consumer Electronics Show, which I used to attend every year. It's a vast thing in the Las Vegas Convention Center. Used to be, I think, a much more important show than it is now. I think the days of the internet have taken some of the zing out of the idea of rolling your stuff out at a trade show, because we've gotten fairly good at being able to demo new products just whenever they come, appear. You can make, press releases and, really make as much publicity as you want. You don't necessarily need to wait for all the industry journalists to show up in, at your trade show to make the news. But that being said, there's a number of interesting little niche products that were there. The best of, on the other hand, I'm going to say products that came out of the show, really limited list, I'm going to say, in my own opinion. There was ridiculous amounts of interest around urine analyzers, little things you can mount inside your toilet tank, and it'll tell you, I don't know, something going wrong with your pee as you're going. Man, when that's your big news, you're in trouble. I think the best of the show award from Engadget, I think, gave it to a mobility gamepad for people who can't have proper use of their hands or other disabilities, so you can buy a very, very expensive assemble it yourself gamepad. Just not a lot of stuff that I thought was of general interest. But if you disagree, please post your pics to the chat, and maybe I'm wrong. That said, the big announcement, which is it's an announcement of something that's going away, and this will cheer the hearts of many people and concern maybe somebody, is that Windows 8.1 officially is dead as of today. Yesterday was the last day of support for Windows 8.1, which is the last of the weird, they call it the Metro interface, but it was Microsoft's incredibly man, they really tried hard to get all of Windows Desktop onto kind of a tabletized experience. And before they just basically faced an absolute revolt of their customers and decided to back it up, dramatically in terms of the overall Windows interface with Windows 10. 8.1 was the last of the tweaky versions where they tried to put back all the things that they broke in Windows 8. They made the start menu at least a little bit more usable than it was with just the big button menu of Windows 8. The charms bar, good lord, what were they? It was things again that are not bad for if you were all using these things on like an iPad or a tablet, but on desktop these things were not popular at all. Anyway, what this means as a practical level is that Windows 8.1 is no longer supported, which means within probably hours, there will be some kind of horrific, known malware out in the world that will probably allow people to do horrible things to Windows 8.1 systems, usually in under a week or two of them announcing, end of life on previous Windows operating systems. Malware comes out that, deployed by the right people will give people access to your system and let you, basically, it means that your data will not be safe in a very short period of time, and Windows will not be fixing it. Microsoft will not be fixing these things. So realistically, if you are using Windows 8.1 or 8 or 7 or anything like that for any of the data that you love and care for, stop doing it immediately, because if your machine is exposed to the world in any meaningful way, if you've got any kind of internet connection attached to it, your data, it's not in a good place. So it's time to get rid of those things. And we'll actually be talking a little bit about how to address getting rid of different hard drives and forcing upgrading at the end of the show, if I get a chance here. Anyway, so officially, this also means that ComicBase is no longer supporting the Windows 8. Now, realistically, if you got Windows 8, can you install ComicBase? Yeah, we're not doing anything to block you from doing it. On the other hand, if you say, yeah, something's not working right, and it has anything even remotely to do with Windows, we'll be like, what we want to do, it's not a supported operating system anymore. So, it's time to go, guys. Whatever your feelings for Windows 10 are, I think I've maybe met one person my entire life who was nostalgic about the Windows 8 interface and rejected Windows 10. Most of the people who hated Windows 10 were people who really, really were happy with Windows 7. Windows 10 actually got Microsoft back on track. Windows 11's, aside from some goofy things about the nav bar, which you can turn off, is also not bad. So if you're using any of those modern operating systems, that's the supported path for you ahead right now. So I'd say keep going with that if you're doing it, and if you're not doing it yet, it's time to move forward. All right, comic industry stuff. All right, you guys have probably all heard by now. There's always this massive gap between the comic media and the normies out there. Remember there was actually a time back in the '90s when the normies, just everyone from the New York Times down to your local newspaper were deeply, deeply concerned because they were going to kill Superman. Whereas the comic industry basically said, well, it'll be a big issue and everything, but we know Superman's coming back because it's a comic book character, for God's sake. Anyway, so whenever a story breaks into the general press, it's almost always less than it appears to be. Typical of this one right now is the normie press, the regular business journals, the regular media and so forth are reporting that yes, in the latest issue of DC Comics, the Joker is getting pregnant. Because you can tie this into whatever trend narrative you want or whatever else. The comic version of this one is it's sort of Joker is up to his old hijinks, with Gotham City, stopped by Zatanna, which is an odd choice, who cast a spell which loosely worded effectively made it so he was going to be his own pregnant, I don't know, what do you even call this? But he was going to give, quote unquote, birth to some kind of clay looking character that was like a little mini him. It was just weird. Bad story from a bad comic that isn't really being bought that much, but I guess it got the attention of everyone. So if you like that sort of thing, Joker, the Man Who Stopped Laughing, look for the latest issue, and it's one of those things. I can't stop yawning with this one. I mean, it's this is one of those controversies, quote unquote, that just absolutely puts me to sleep. That said, things that are more interesting, at least to me, our moderator here reported Comic Connect just had an auction where I believe the final auction amount was north of $1,000. Somebody was paid for page 5, that page and that page alone of a Batman comic. I'm trying to see, was it Detective 27 or what was the actual one? Let me go ahead and look up the message on this one. I had it bookmarked before the show, but let me see if I can find it here and put it up on the screen. Let's go here. Yep, now here we are. This was on mycomicshop.com. I apologize. Batman, the Batman #1, not the first appearance of Batman, but just the first, comic Batman. Which also was the first appearance of Joker in that particular book. But page 5 only, they gave it sort of a fanciful CGC grade of 0.1, which basically means, here's something we found that someone paid us to stick into a slab, and we think it's kind of interesting. It has effectively no grade because it's a rando page. It's not in particularly good shape, as you can see from the drawing on the whole thing. But if you ever want to own this yourself, apparently the going rate was just shy of $1,300, and somebody has an interesting item for their wall. I think this means exactly nothing. Just another one of those curious things. All things considered, honestly, I think it's a funnier story, the one where somebody paid some stupid amount of money for the one on Action Comics, as in the actual #1 taken out with an X-Acto knife from a beat up copy of Action Comics #1, and so it was Action Comics' #1, not Action Comics #1, and that, for what it's worth, I think is pretty interesting. Jesse Comics has comments like, I've cut way back on new comics. For the most part, they just suck. Yeah, it's a mixed bag out there. It's I in particular get really, really tired of the gimmicky stuff. I just think the comic industry would be much tougher shape, in much tighter shape, if they would focus on good storytelling, good writing, and good artists, good artistry and so forth. I really, there are folks out there who are getting it done, and it's worth looking for them. But honestly, if you got to look outside of the U.S. comic industry and look into other things like that, there's a lot of great graphic storytelling in the world. And I'll actually talk a little bit about that at the end if I get a chance. Yeah, this kind of nonsense with the Joker, it's a badly drawn, badly constructed. It's clickbait in comic form. It's the only way I could put it. I don't know if it's worth supporting with your money. But if you find it interesting, go for it. If not, find something that actually will rekindle the spark you feel for comics, because there's other cool things out there. Speaking of cool things out there, I'll bump this one next. Conan and the Savage Sword omnibuses are now available. Titan is doing them, and they just came up for order in this cycle. So if you missed the last time they took these massive Savage Sword of Conan omnibuses, let me see if I can grab it here. These things were absolutely gorgeous. I mean, they were things that were, back when they were originally run, very hard to find in the magazine format. You didn't get them in most comic shops. The art, absolutely stellar. Good storytelling, much more grown-up type of things. Decent fantasy done right by artists and writers who gave a darn. So yeah, worth looking for. The omnibuses that reprinted these ones, it was done a little bit on the down low the first time out. They didn't really do a lot of publicity for them until later in the run, and by then the first editions of them were all gone. So I'm really glad to see these back in print. They're pricey. They're like $125 or $150, depending on whether you want the Conan the Barbarian one, which is like the first 25 issues of Conan the Barbarian, or the Savage Sword one, which reprints all those original ones from Savage Tales, Savage Sword, Conan, and so forth. But honestly, I think they're worth it. It's a decent value. And honestly, if you compare the price of those to just even the cover price of the comic books, in the original, it's not super far off. You're basically getting 25 magazine-sized issues in these, and it's a lot of reading for the money. So I'd say, yeah, definitely, hit up your local comic shop for the want list this week, because now's the time to order. And look forward to those if you're into that sort of thing at all. And finally, the other news item I've got is there's a sale going on for Marvel Unlimited. Let's see if I can find that link. Here we go. Of course, it's on the wrong monitor. Let's pull it over there. Okay. If you like digital comic books at all, and you like Marvel, two things are an open question right now. But if you are, then there's a lot of reading to be had here. Marvel's digital all-you-can-eat program, I think it's got about 30,000 of their books you can read online on your different devices and so forth. They're running that one. It's typically $99, and they have a kind of upper tier of that one, which is like your unlimited annual plus, which is usually like $99.95. But they have a deal here where you can buy that, and also they'll give you like this exclusive member kit, which is it's a couple of special limit variant comics that are unique to the program. Kind of a bad looking Daredevil action figure and a couple other a little bits and pieces. But you can get all those things for $69. The promo code, if that sort of thing is interesting to you, is plus 2023. I don't get anything for recommending them, but if you do like digital comics and you like Marvel, I gotta say it's a lot of reading for not much money. So $69 will get you in, and again, you pick up a couple of variants while you're at it. If you do, if no one else has done them, please, if you're one of those folks, take the variant, scan it in, submit as a correction, and call it even in terms of I helped you out. All right, okay, guys. All right, so let's get going. A couple other comments on the back here. Let's see here. Okay, so Ed Billiard's joining here. Great to see you, everyone. And Comic says, "Holy 1978 rabbit test movie, Batman." What? I don't even understand the reference. Anyway, but let's see here. Oh yes, and Greg Hicks says, "Just a heads up, read the Titan re-release of the various Conan books. There's some wholly Marvel-owned stories there in the Marvel versions of books, which will not be in the Titan editions. Interesting. I know that, for instance, there was when they went back to press on the omnibuses for the what ifs, that I think there was like a Savage Shang-Chi one, which was considered, I don't know, maybe it was offensive or something. Marvel's so woke these days. But suddenly, like the what if number 24 was mysteriously absent from the omnibus. So I guess that might be one of those things to look out for as well. It'd be interesting as to whether or not. I'd be interested in the details on how the Marvel and the Titan ones compare. But thanks for the heads up on that one. All right. And let's see here. John Nelson says Marvel Unlimited has been very good. And and then some talk about the interface of the Marvel Unlimited. Oh, by the way, I was looking at that one. Lot of griping these days about the new Comixology app 4.0. Let's hope that I think general people are going to smooth out these digital interfaces in time, if not. But if you like getting your books in digital format, this is not a bad way of going, all things considered. All right, let's get on with the tech tips. All right, so I'm going to try something because, well, darn it, I want to. And let's see if I can get these hooked up. I did not have a chance to get macros headed up for this stuff ahead of time, but darn it, I spent way too much time trying to conform video formats ahead of this show. And so I'm gonna load up some snazzy graphics. So help me. If I can get this to load. Give me just a second here. Talk amongst yourself. Oh, we have a question here which does not involve a snazzy graphic, so we'll answer this one first. I believe it's Ed Brito is saying, ComicBase TV, is it possible to add a forward and back function similar to the web browser into ComicBase? This reduces having to type in the title all the time. So one thing that I'd like to do, and it's come up before, and it's a little tricky from an interface standpoint, is we've got ComicBase architected in such a way that that we can basically say, here's the last 4 or 5 things you've searched for in one sense or another. There's an interface problem that's unique to ComicBase in that the most obvious way is to do something like a forward back, like, okay, I went and I did a search, but like bounce back to what I did before this one. It'd be great if there was like just a big arrow that pointed backward, which would take you to that search. Unfortunately, in ComicBase, since ComicBase 1.0, there's been a ginormous set of forward and back arrows on the main interface, except that they take you forward and back a title. And so there's considerable semantic overlap between those two, ideas, and we haven't really come up with a great way of representing the idea of go forward to your, go forward or back, or really go back to your last search in a way that doesn't conflict with every other darn thing in the universe. The closest we've seen that we kind of tested out is the idea of saying, having a menu command, like, just imagine like, we're already using control, the back arrow, but just imagine something like that just basically is like, like a history thing where it would just said go back one, go forward one, and not really naming what the one is, and just having it be something that you would either hit through the menu or more likely, hit the keyboard command for. It's not super satisfying. And one thing that happened in the user testing we did on it is nobody found it. In other words, if we didn't have it out there as a main navigation feature on the main interface, no one knew that function even existed. I mean, the people who did was like, oh, that might be cool. I might remember that and use that someday. But it was not something that came up. So we're looking into it. I mean, this feels like one of those interface problems where there's a clever solution to it that's not confusing. It's just we haven't hit it yet. But if we can make that happen, we have an interest in doing that. And that's also one of those things that we might be able to slip into one of these quarterly releases. So thanks for raising the issue again to the height of things. But it's a weird one because the technical problem is easier to solve than the interface problem on this one, but they're both real problems. So oh God, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, and Greg, our mod, explained the reference on here. Rabbit Test is a movie in which Billy Crystal becomes the first pregnant man. Didn't see it. Sorry, man. All right. So anyway, I guess that's what we're doing with Joker now. Whatever, people, just get back to writing stories. All right, moving on. All right, so let me see if I can pull these up, and we'll take it from there. Pulling up. All right, let's see if we can make this happen and dazzle you with our graphics here. Ready and go. What? All right, guys, first tech tip. How the devil do you create a second database? All right, well, let's talk into it. First of all, question about this one is, should you? It's really my first question I have whenever anyone asks how I do this sort of thing is, well, what are you trying to do when you're making the second database? And it really comes down to a question of, is it something where, the comics themselves really need to be kept separate from each other, and you really aren't going to have a lot of interest in managing the two together at any point in the future, or knowing what the whole collection is worth at any point in the future, or is it something where just periodically I want to be able to pull up a sub list of, like, say, here's all my graded comics, or here's all my comics that I'm interested in selling. I say if it's the former thing, like for instance, the person was asking the question of me most recently was actually managing multiple donation collections that basically they were going to take possession of the comics, using a copy of ComicBase. They're going to index the whole thing. They're going to, pass off a list of the comics along with their valuation to the people who are going to process the donation. And that was the last time they're ever going to see these comics. And then they're going to, wash, rinse, and repeat and go on to the next donation set. If so, that's a perfect reason to spin off a multiple database. If, on the other hand, you're really just looking for a subset, so for instance, what are all the comics I've got that are graded, or what are all the comic books I've got that are from John Romita, or what are all my magazines, what are all my Marvel books, things like that, I would definitely keep those in your main database, because you can always get to the things you want with a search. You don't need to separate them into a separate database, because anytime you move into a separate database, you're signing up for a lot of extra overhead in your life. You have to run the update on multiple databases. You have to kind of manage the files, make sure you don't get you have to swap between files all the time when you're doing your data entry and so forth. Make sure you're entering it in the right thing and so forth. So I'd say if you can do what you want to do without splitting the database, in general, that would be my choice. And especially when you talk about the use of custom fields, if you have any of the Pro Archive or 4K Archive editions, there's custom fields you can have, which just, even if it's something as esoteric as saying, What's a comic book that is stored in my storage locker, right? You can just make storage locker, one of your check fields, find all the books that are in your storage locker then, and whenever you want that list, it's there. But in the meantime, you've also got the ability to see all your comics within the context of the entire collection. So you're not saying, oh well, it wasn't in my list from the storage locker, so I wound up rebuying the same issue again because I thought it was missing it, because it really was in a separate database. So I'd say in general, think about whether you want to do it, and then we get into the question of how you do it. So let's talk about how you would do it. And it turns out it's frighteningly easy. If you just want to make a new database, first thing I notice here, right at the top here, is that the name of your current database is this thing that's in the parenthesis right at the top here, and which in this case, this is ComicBase 23. That's the name of my program, parenthesis, Livestream Pete's ComicBase, right? So this is basically a copy of my comics at a certain point in time, which I use for these live stream lectures. Now, if I want to make a new database, I just go into the file menu, I say new database. It'll ask me, do I want to copy my current grading, publishers, etc., to the new database? Basically, I'd say, look, if you did any amount of new data work, setting up custom grades or anything like that, go ahead and say yes. If not, hit no. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes right now. It's going to ask you when you want to save it. Now, it's going to want to open up straight to your comic databases folder. Now, unless you've got a good reason not to, I say keep it right there, because that's always going to be the default location where the ComicBase looks for any databases in the future. So, I'd say, look, unless you've got a reason that you don't want to store it in this folder, that would definitely be where I go. So give it a name. It's going to default to my collection. Let's call it, my second collection. Hit save, and it's going to go ahead and create that one. At that point, you'll want to go ahead and download the most recent content update, and then you're off to the races. You've got a second database. So it'll just take a second to set that up, and that's about it. Now, when it comes up, one thing I'd always tell you, if you are managing more than one database, is do two things. For the first one happened here automatically, is it came up with the default color scheme, with the default theme over here, which is blue wave. You'll notice back at my other database here, let's go back to my live stream one, that when that one opens up here, it comes up as purple, right? If you have a database that's already using the blue default theme, I would strongly suggest that you swap the theme of one of those databases to be something that's dramatically different in terms of its color and style. So for instance, if I pull up the themes over here and I went to File, Themes to get to this, just pick something that looks different, right? And, okay, so here's the blue grunge theme, right? Or here, let's make this really obnoxious, red grunge, right? So now, whenever I go to the live stream one here, I'm going to see something that looks like this. And when I go over to my new database, I'm going to see something that looks like this. And I know immediately which database I'm in. I don't need to look at the little, title up at the top here to know what I'm doing. And that really is going to save me a lot of trouble. I've lost track over the years of how many times I've started doing data entry in the wrong thing. And the thing that saves me all the time, because ComicBase is always going to open up the last database you worked with. And so for that reason, we are always keeping our databases, my personal database is green. Our master database that we do our work out of is blue, right? My live stream one is purple. And the thing that keeps this all straight is just the idea I can at a glance know that I'm working, in the right one or not. So strongly suggest you do that. The second thing I strongly suggest everyone does if you're going to run more than one database is go up here under Sidekick. I'm not sure if I have started up here because I just restarted my machine recently. But down at the lower right-hand corner of your machine, unfortunately, it's on the other monitor, so you can't see it right now. But let me see if I can pull that up for you. Just a second here. One thing I did not manage to do is I did not manage to get a working two monitor setup going for the live streams yet. I'll talk in a little bit about retiring computers in a bit, but that unfortunately was something that did not happen for me over this Christmas break. All right, let's see if we can get this rolling. Come on, come to me. All right, there you are. All right, so Sidekick typically lives down here in the area next to your clock, down the bottom right-hand corner. Now, on your computer, if it isn't your second monitor, you've probably got a little arrow pointing up there, which shows you all your notification area icons. You're looking for the one that's the little superhero guy. So go ahead and click on the little superhero guy. and that'll bring up Sidekick. Now, Sidekick is a program that's meant to manage all the boring things in ComicBase. So, yeah, very much the model of this is the shoemaker and the elves. Is that when you go at night and you knock off your work with ComicBase for the day, close up ComicBase, and then Sidekick can kick off at 2 in the morning if it has to. It does this according to a schedule, which you can set up here, but the default is the wee hours of the day. And then he will go and do things like checking for updates. He'll make sure your stuff gets backed up to the cloud. He'll run routine maintenance, all the things that, are really kind of boring to do, but, necessary from time to time. Anyway, if you have more than one database, you will very, very much want to click on the settings on this and make sure you've added that second database to the list of databases that Sidekick manages. And the way you do that, once again, is you launch Sidekick, hit the gear in the upper right-hand corner here, hit plus, right? And then locate that database you just made, which I think was called My Comics, My Second Collection right there. Open that up. You'll see it down here as the second one down there. And at that point, that becomes one of the databases that Sidekick will take care of keeping updated for you and so forth. Because if you don't do that, then you'll find out that your main database is always getting updated every week with the stuff automatically. But if you ever want to work with your second database, you have to then sit around while you say, oh, wait, this one hasn't been updated in a month, and then you sit around waiting for it to update. And that's no fun at all. So I say, don't do it. Go ahead and just, let Sidekick manage that sort of thing if you're going to run a second database. All right. Let's see what else we got going on here. And we have a lot of suggestions about the forward and back buttons. Let's see here. Yes, or it says if you build it, we'll find and use it. Let's see. Yeah, we did try different treatments of the arrows, as far as what the forward and back mean. The problem we've got is that the semantics of go forward and back a title aren't the same as the semantics of go forward and back to a thingy I searched. So, like I say, it hasn't been, so putting the two buttons next to each other and having them look anything like a button for each other, people want to make a connection that makes sense in their heads. The idea would be something like, go back a little bit in a VCR, go back a track. If you put the buttons next to each other, that's typically what people think when they see buttons arranged that way. We could certainly allow you to remap with the forward and back do, whether it goes forward and back different searches as opposed to forward and back titles. But man, I think you'd hate to lose that title. Yeah, it's a hard one. We'll look into it. It continues to be something there's a lot of interest in doing, and it's a surprisingly difficult one. All right. Okay. Yeah. And or some more commentary on that one. So yeah, we agree of the way that is interesting, but yeah, we'll continue to look into it. All right, moving on. And let me see if I can get my next one queued up here on the Hyperdeck, because this would be so cool if this actually worked. Let's try it. Hey, my goodness, that actually did work. All right, next up, how do you merge two databases? So, we just talked about how you would make a second database. This is almost always followed within a day or two of us answering that question on our tech support lines by someone saying, well, I've got 26 databases. How do I put them back together again? And that's the point where you'll notice I gave you like this big long speech about why you shouldn't necessarily split your databases. But if you did split your databases and you find that you later want to put them together, how do you do it? Well, great question. And we have a mostly good answer for you on that one. What you would do is from the database you want to merge from. Let's say I want to put, go back from the My Second database. I want to merge into my Livestream database. And by the way, this answer relies very much on having the Pro or Better version of ComicBase. If you don't have the Pro or Better version of ComicBase, I'm actually going to say you're probably better off paying for the upgrade to get that, because you need a function in ComicBase called export, and this is just a perfect excuse to go ahead and spring for that right now, because you're really going to want it to pull this one off. So from the database you want to get rid of, go under File, say Export, and that's going to pull up a dialog that looks like this. From that one, I would go ahead. You got to pull off at least you're going to pick the fields you want to kick out of the old database and load into the new one. You got to pick at least the item number, the condition, the quantity of stock, and so forth. and I believe the title, which for some reason is way down there. Because those, the title, the item number, the condition, the quantity stock, those are things that really determine that you've got the comic book, what it is, and so forth. And it'll warn you if you don't have at least those ones right there. Now, beyond that, anything else that's important to you, which you suspect is unique to you, go ahead and add to the list. So, for instance, if you kept your own notes, go ahead and add that to the list. Any custom fields that you use, go ahead and add those to the list, and so forth. I would go ahead and always suggest including the field headers because it makes the next part of the process much simpler. But go ahead and export those out. It's going to make a text file. Now, I'm going to, in order to do this, I'm going to, okay. All right. So I'm going to add a couple books here because remember, I just made that database and I didn't add, I didn't actually put anything in stock, which is what was just warning me about. All right, so let me go ahead just because I want to show the process. I'm going to add a few things to this. I'm going to add a few things to this one. So let's start out. Let's grab your title. Let's put the item number, the condition, the quantity, the stock, and the notes. All right. Included my field headers. Great. Export. Warns you, hey guys, please, we spent 30 years of our lives making this program. Just because we made it easy to export, please don't steal from us because it's our life here and that's really rude. Anyway, I would typically save this as to my desktop, so I'm calling this exported comicbooks.txt.txt. I hit save. Only takes a second to do the job, and it's going to make then a little file. And let me go ahead and bring it over to that monitor so you can see it. Go and hide this, and I'll show it to you on the screen here. It makes a little file here with all the information that I just asked it to export, which if you open it up and look at it, looks exactly like this. All right. I use tab delimited. That's the default there. And just along the top here, it says what all the different fields mean. So again, that makes it so the importing part goes much easier. All right. Now with that done, so I went to my old one and I said export. I'm now going to go ahead and switch to the database I want to move the data into. And I'm just going to go into my Livestream one over here. All right. And then I'm going to say file import. Now, import is built into all versions of ComicBase, but the export you got to have the Pro or Better for. So that's why I said if you don't have Pro or Better, a great excuse to update because there really isn't a way to get this done otherwise without, well, I can't think of any reasonable way to do it. But anyway, it's going to say, what file do you want to import? I'm going to point to my exported comic books that I just had over there, and I'm going to say open. All right, now when I do that, it's going to open up, and it's going to say, all right, now here's all the fields you could be importing. What fields do you want to import? And it gives you a preview of the first record. Now, because I went and made, I exported the title headers, then it knew how to automatically match up the order of the fields in the file. So it saved me all the trouble of matching these and getting the order right. So that's why exporting with field headers really is a time saver on this one. So it shows you, okay, so the first thing I got here is Western Thrillers #1, near mint. I have quantity 1 of, and I didn't put any particular notes on there, but if I did, it would show it to me. And when you're all done, just go ahead and say import. Now, when you import these things, it's going to automatically move the data from the new things into your database if there are any items that match exactly to things that are already there. So, for instance, if my Western Thrillers had already had a copy of issue #1, it would then say that I have 2 copies of issue #1. So there are a couple limits to what it'll do because it's always going to want to add similar items together. So if for some reason there's a reason you wanted to keep them apart, what I would do with that case is I would actually use one of the custom fields and make it so that I'm assuming you have the Pro or better versions of ComicBase, but I would go ahead and make a custom field in the old one. And probably mass change it to say, from my second database or something. If for some reason I want to preserve that this one originally came from the other database. If I don't care about doing that and I just want to put them together, then obviously don't bother. All right, so that is how you would do it, guys. And I think that should do it. Let's see here. I can tell people really want that feature of going forward and back in a search here. And we're determined to find a way to make this happen. A lot of discussion on it. This is good, guys. I mean, we'll find a way. Somehow, some way, we will make this happen. Okay, let's move on and let's try and see if we can get another Oh, wait. No, that's not what I wanted to do right now. That's the bonus tip for later. Let's go to. All right. Updating your mobile database info. All right. So, question arose is I'm using ComicBase on my mobile device, and I noticed that my mobile device, I can add new comics to the database, but it doesn't appear on my mobile data right away. So what's going on? And what this comes down to is it really comes down to a question of where is your data stored. The master copy of everything in ComicBase doesn't live on our servers. The master copy of everything in ComicBase lives on your computer. We figure it's your data. The alternative to this one is, if ComicBase was more of a web-based play and everything was living on our servers by default, this has many advantages. It means that you can, add to it from 30 different, locations around the world, and everything will be updated simultaneously. If that's a use case that somehow applies to you. Somewhat slower to enter, because entering on mobile isn't quite as fast as entering things in a desktop. But more importantly, it kind of changes the relationship between you, the data, and us. Is that if it lives on your computer, it's yours. It's not our business what you've got. And furthermore, the program runs forever. So if you buy a version of ComicBase and you record all your books and do the whole thing, and then decide, not really interested in comic collecting right now, I'm going to go away from the field for a decade. Your data's still there. It's there, as long as you want it, because it's your data. Now, if the alternative is that if your data lived on our servers and you went away, actually the way this typically goes is the second you stop paying money to us, if we're running the server and we're housing your data, the second you stop paying money for us, you'll probably get a notice saying, hey, your data's going away if you don't, if you don't ante up, and at some point we just delete your stuff. This is not the relationship we ever wanted with our customers. So we've preserved that, the idea that your data is yours pretty much into the core of our being since the very early days of ComicBase. Now, the trick we've had is we also, while we're maintaining that your data is your data stuff, we also want to give you as much of that mobily goodness as we can possibly manage without a lot of work on your part. So how do we make that happen? Because the only way we can show you data, if you're out, in Poughkeepsie and your data is back on your computer's hard drive back in Sunnyvale, California, the only way we can show you your data on, from that is if somehow you saved a copy of that data someplace where we can see it, so that when you ask us from on the road in Poughkeepsie, as you're on a business trip and you're just browsing comic stores in the area, the only way we can show you that data is if we then look at the copy that's on our server and say, well, yeah, last time you updated your data and our server saw it, you did or didn't have a particular issue of Miracle Man in stock, for instance, which I'm just using a real example from my own life from last business trip I went on. So anyway, it wasn't actually Poughkeepsie, but it was close. But anyway, yeah. So, but for that to happen, you've got to periodically tell us what you've got, and we'll house that on our servers for a while for you. Now, again, if you don't, we guarantee we'll maintain your data on our servers, gratis for as long as you've got an active subscription. Beyond that, we don't really talk about it much. We just kind of say, well, if space gets tight, we might get rid of some stuff if you're not paying us for the space on our servers. But again, it's not threatening you because it's all your stuff is still on your hard drive, right? But anyway, the data that the way that we make this whole thing work is, again, remember Sidekick is one of its functions, and let's go ahead and show that one again. Let's go back over. That's monitor number 4, and I want to pull up Sidekick now. One of Sidekick's functions, he's really the glue that holds the whole game together, is he has the ability to save your database to the cloud, which is a fancy way of saying save a copy of your database to our servers, so that we can get to it there and look at it and, be able to feed your data back to you from the mobile app. Now, when you do that in Sidekick, and by default, the schedule on that one, if we look at the settings on this one, by default, it's going to do that once a week. Save to cloud weekly, and it's going to do it at in this particular one, was it 11 p.m. at night on this computer. So as long as ComicBase is closed on Tuesday, It's going to go compress down a copy of ComicBase, of my local ComicBase, send it up to to the servers, and about half an hour later, after it does that, our servers will be able to open up that database, update your information from your online thing, be able to show it to you through the mobile app, and you'll be able to see everything as it goes. Now, I would say, look, for best results, make sure you periodically leave your machine on with ComicBase closed and Sidekick running in the background. In which case, basically, as often as you really need it to happen, it'll just happen automatically, and for all practical purposes, it'll get done. Now, if for some reason, like I'm going on a really big shopping trip and I really want to, Comic-Con is next week, and I really want to make sure I have my latest and greatest stuff saved up to the cloud right beforehand, at that point, it's worth doing a special manual run of this whole thing, where go ahead and close ComicBase, come up, open Sidekick, hit save to cloud, make sure that we've got your very latest data before you go on the trip. And if you want to, there's a couple other things you can do in the save to cloud over here. You also can have it automatically generate mobile reports for your collection overview, collection report, issue checklist, price list. You can have it update your wish list on Atomic Avenue and do a whole lot of things like that, as optional tasks that you can do when it's doing that save. So, definitely have a look at that and see if those help you. But as soon as you've done that, then it will automatically save a copy of your database. We'll extract out a copy of your data, which then we can serve up to you from the mobile app, and you should be good to go. Now, it does that stuff once a week. Now, one thing it does even more frequently than that, where we don't need to get a list of every single thing you've got, is we will go ahead and I'm going to put my mug on the screen here. Every time you, through ComicBase, check for updates, look at your collection stats, and a couple other things, we will do a very quick thing where we'll update the overall stats of your collection on our server. So what's your collection worth? But how many books have you got in stock? Things like that, because we can do that in like a second or two. Transmitting up an actual copy of your entire database, depending on your upload speed, takes many minutes. So, but the actual stats on your collection, as far as how many books you've got, things like that, that we can do much more frequently, and we'll do that several times during the course of just using ComicBase. So you'll be able to see those things change all the time, but the actual list of your books won't happen until you save a copy of the backup to the cloud. All right, let me see. All right, we're getting toward the end of the show, and honestly, I'm getting a little talked out here, so I'm gonna save a couple of these tips for later, including, I think I'm gonna save the retiring a hard drive one for later too, because it's a little funny. But because I was running so close to the end here, I did not have a chance to run downstairs and grab my visual aid before I did it. So I'm gonna let that one hold out just for a second here. But let me do a quick check of the chat, see if there are any other questions that you guys had, because that is the most important stuff. Andre wants to give everyone their attention. His project, the cover catalog, is out. You can get the index torrent file, which it's got to be a torrent. He's got that in the chat there if you want to. Andre, this is a remarkable project. It's kind of a modern take on the Gerber books, if you remember the photojournal guide to comic books, where basically imagine if you just took all the pictures in ComicBase, all cajillion of them, and printed them out. Number one, it would take a bajillion pages, but it's really cool just seeing all that stuff laid out in one place. And so he's actually done that. And I guess next time we go to press, there'll be another 50,000 those things to add to your list, and so it'll take even more pages if you ever silly enough to print it. Anyway, but let's see here. John says, I don't use Sidekick if you don't know how to save to cloud without it. There is no way to do, I'm afraid. It's one of those things we can't do from within ComicBase, because it involves taking a copy of the database that you're currently using, which is a trick you can't do from within the program. You need to do it from something which isn't the program, because if ComicBase is open, it's opening with your database, and so it can't save that same database, because that database has to all be on disk in what's called a quiescent state and so forth. I mean, we could do some terrible gyrations about saving backups, renaming backups after you do a cloud upload and things like that, but realistically, the way to get that done is just periodically turn on Sidekick, even if you don't like it running all the time, just fire it off just to do that. But that's the glue that makes all this happen. All right, let's see here. Larry's Library says send new title submission via the support email, getting delivery and complete email server message was sent via Gmail. File size is okay on the cover image. Don't know. That's probably a good one for support. Go ahead and just send the query straight to support@comicbase.com, and they'll be able to troubleshoot your setup with you and see what's going on with that. Yeah, don't know. All right, let's see here. Doug N asks, will Sidekick work if your computer is asleep? No, sadly, it will not. If your computer is completely idled down, then not. What I would suggest is go ahead if you've got a computer like that. Set so your screen sleeps at a certain point, but just make it so the computer can still run background tasks. Because it's kind of like if your phone is actually shut down, you can't obviously run things with it. But if your phone is just kind of like in power savery mode, then you kind of can. Unfortunately, the problem with sleep on a desktop is if your computer's slept on a desktop, things don't run in the background at all. They're just down. All right. So I think we've got it for now. I did want to oh my goodness. And Andre says, yes, it's if you'd ever were crazy enough to try to print the cover catalog out, 27,000 pages. Don't do it unless you're running your own tree farm and you own stock in the ink suppliers of the world. Please don't. Could you have an option to exit and save to cloud in ComicBase? I guess, but it'd be a crazy one, because I mean, think about what happens when you're saving a cloud, and if you actually watch it do its thing, it does take a fair amount of time. Is that you'd be exiting the program, you'd be shutting down the database, we'd then be compressing, basically, so we'd be running with maybe just a progress window open, right, with no database open. We would be having to compress that database down, and then we have to transmit that database, which again can depend on your internet connection. The best case version of that thing is you're talking about 4 or 5 minutes. The worst case is like 20, depending on there's some people with some terrible internet connections, and that's just a weird place for your computer to be in when you're exiting, especially because you wouldn't be able to launch the program again while that's all happening, because it would be trying to use the database that you're kind of holding locked. So I don't know. I mean, there's a reason we architected Sidekick to do this job, and so that's kind of his job. So that's probably the solution we would likely stick with. But anyway, that being said, if there's some particular reason you never ever want to launch Sidekick, then let us know more. I mean, maybe there's something we're not getting about the situation that will change our thinking. It can happen, definitely. All right. I wanted to, because when we were going through like Christmas and New Year's, like I remember on New Year's, one of my big tips, which I was, pretty, I was glad I took the time to think about it, was when you do comic books all day long professionally, it's easy to get really, really jaded. And honestly, when comic companies are doing things that just feel like cash grabs, I think the big problem with that one on a long-term basis, I mean, this is a habit I've had since I was like 8, right? The thing that threatens me on that habit is it just makes me think, what the hell? Why am I supporting these guys who are just grabbing after my money and delivering dreck I'm not enjoying very much? And that makes you want to not, collect anything. And so, that's, I think, the worst thing that can ever happen to someone when you're dealing with comic collectors is you never want to have people just hate the whole medium, which I think is an overreaction. But man, it's easy to feel that way if you grew up on superheroes and Marvel and DC, and you think of those as the home team, and everyone on there is turning out books that just are not bringing any joy to your life. So, some of the things I said, during the 5 resolutions for a better New Year, number 1 is look beyond the stuff you normally go to. Is like once a month, try to see something new that you haven't seen before. Explore the greater world of comic books. I mean, I really fell in love with comic books all over again, thanks to the British invasion, titles of the 90s, when creators like Dave McKean, which I think is one of the coolest painter, artist, mixed media guys to ever use the field. He's also an accomplished jazz musician, which guy's disgustingly talented, and he's also a nice guy. Darn him. But Neil Gaiman, Brian Bolland, all these guys were coming. It was so amazing in the 90s. Just being able to go over to comic shows over there. And at a certain point after the comic show, the convention floor kind of wraps up and everyone just kind of heads over to the bar. And so you can just, have drinks with Grant Morrison and stuff like that, just knocking back pints and talking crap. I mean, it's that was some of my fondest memories of the entire hobby. But I mean, there are genuinely interesting, things being done all over the place in terms of the comic world, and whether it's bande dessinée, European comic books, manga, things like that. Check out things you haven't necessarily looked at, recently, and explore. Go out of your normal thing. And on that note, one thing I just want to say is, like, I want to do a better job of highlighting things that I just like. These are things that brought some joy in my life lately, and pass them on to you guys. And one of those things I'm going to say is, it's manga, but it's not manga. It's a series called, it was originally put up as manga, ran through a number of things just in Japanese only, and I do not read Japanese. But it was called Alice in Borderland. It was a really, really interesting series of manga titles up there. The first 8 books, I believe, have just been translated to English. You can pick them up online now. Or I think the next couple are due in March. But just as well, if you guys ever liked Squid Game, if you ever saw that during COVID lockdown, it was like one of the few bright spots in the entertainment landscape during that whole thing. It was a Korean series about, just basically take desperate people, put them in a thing that says, okay, look, you can play for, millions of dollars in cash and prizes, really just, millions of dollars in money. Problem, of course, is that for this thing to happen, you will all, be taking part in different games, and the people who lose the games are killed. And every time someone dies from the game, anyone who's left over, you see this pile of money just grow and grow. That was Squid Game. If you like the idea of that, or guys might also remember a Japanese movie called Battle Royale, which also was drawn from a manga. Imagine those two concepts put together, and there's a Netflix series now called Alice in Borderland. And just what it is just imagine a bunch of 20 and 30-year-olds, wake up one morning in a Tokyo where everyone's gone. It's one of these eerie 28 days later kind of feelings where suddenly just you're the only people on the planet, it seems. And so you eventually run into a few other people who, seemingly are also, okay, don't know where 98% of the people we ever met were, but here's a few other people. And then suddenly all the giant, billboards and storefronts and everything else of Tokyo start directing the people who are left to game arenas. And, you say, okay, the game is this way, and you have a certain number, a certain amount of time to register and enter the game field. And if you don't, giant lasers from the sky will drill a pencil-sized hole straight through your brain and knock you dead on the spot. And it doesn't matter if you're 3 stories underground; they will kill you instantly. So you learn very quickly. Yes, I guess you'll be playing in this game, whatever it is. And the games also, as it turns out, they're weird, psychotic, inventive, and fatal. And they often involve taking people who were like paralegals 2 days before, and they're suddenly fighting for their lives, and in games that involve everything from puzzle solving to manipulation to just outright violence. And it's fascinating series. It's the way it's all set up. It's one of these bingeable series that, like, I found myself, they just dropped a second series of it, and after a year and a half of not watching, I thought, it's 9 o'clock at night, let's see what is happening with Alice in Borderland. And suddenly it's 1:30 in the morning. I'm like, I got to go to bed. But at the same time, he's like, you got to find out what happens next. So check it out. It's on Netflix. Well worth the look. It's called Alice in Borderland. If you want to go back to the original source, have a look at the original manga. Like I say, unless you read Japanese, you can only get the first 8 of them. I believe there were 18 or 16 books in the series total, but I believe only part of them, I think the first 2/3 of them are done in English yet. So I'm looking forward to the translation of that one. But if you guys have other series that you liked that you would recommend on, please post them in the chat. Send me a note. I'd love to pass it on, because I do think we got to do a better job of spreading the word about the things that we're genuinely finding great about comics and graphic storytelling, not just the things that bum us out. I like to Pregnant Joker. Give me a freaking break. All right, guys. That's about it for that. And thank you all for joining us, and we'll hit you next time. You guys take care, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.